Well, now it's hard to focus on my paper. I'm worrying how I will look on my Facebook page. Okay. So.
You're on camera.
Okay, there. So most people think about Chernobyl when they think about nuclear power in Ukraine, but the story of nuclear power development in Ukraine long predates the dreadful accident of 1986 and starts actually in Kharkiv with the fascinating history of nuclear physics there. But even after Chernobyl and the trails of 20 years of independence, nuclear energy remains vital to Ukraine. Because Ukraine produces more than 50% of its electricity on the nuclear power plants. Currently, Ukraine has 15 nuclear reactors, and these are all Soviet-type pressurized water reactors, not Chernobyl type, the so-called VVER. Ukrainian officials and energy experts hope to increase this share, and they see it's a mean to decrease the energy dependence on Russia. And declaration by the Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk a week ago about the future of nuclear power goes in that direction. Ukraine confronts a series of persistent obstacles in pursuing nuclear power. And these include, of course, the costly legacy of Chernobyl disaster, the corruption in the energy sector, the aging of power stations, and most importantly for this presentation, the uncertainty about how to deal with nuclear dependence on Russia in terms of both nuclear technologies and the nuclear fuel cycle. And this dependence is, of course, like many others, is the legacy of the Soviet time, because there was no Ukrainian nuclear power during the Soviet time, but the Soviet nuclear power in Ukraine. Just before focusing on different aspects of this dependence, let me tell a few words about how nuclear power developed during the post-Soviet years. After the revelation of the consequence of the Chernobyl disaster, there were strong anti-nuclear movements with other reasons led to the adoption of moratorium on constructions of new nuclear power reactors. And this led to abandonment or mothballing to several nuclear construction projects. For example, the Crimea nuclear power station, and also the mothballing of the construction of the reactors number 2, 3, and 4 at Khmelnytska power station, which I believe summer school participant and organizers visited a few years ago. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union and economic crisis, the attitude towards nuclear power changed dramatically, and nuclear power ceased to be seen as mostly the symbol of colonial dominance of Russia, but as a means to build energy sufficiency and national sovereignty. And in '93, the moratorium was overturned, and the construction resumed in many sites, like at Khmelnytska, Zaporizhzhia, and Rivnenska station. And by 2004, 3 new reactors were brought online. Soon after Orange Revolution, the government started to work on the new energy strategy for Ukraine, which was published in 2006, and it was a very unrealistic energy strategy. At least in the domain of the nuclear power. According to this strategy, 15 existing nuclear stations nuclear reactors would continue to operate at least until 2030, and Ukraine would build even at least 7 more nuclear power reactors. And the strategy noted, for instance, the completion of Khmelnytska units 3 and 4. And the government even signed an agreement with Russia to supply the reactor equipment to finish the stations. But I visited this station 10 days ago, and the construction, of course, has not begun. And I saw only empty, massive, flooded, unfinished concrete structures. And I don't think that they will be completed anytime soon. And moreover, Ukrainian officials declared on several occasions now in August and in October that they're now looking for other than Russian partners to complete the project, which is a bit difficult because, of course, the existing construction are conceived for Soviet-type reactors. They now want to finish this construction projects with Czech Škoda, but the problem is that Czech Škoda is part of Russian industrial group as well. So this example illustrates many ambiguities and paradoxes in the development of this so-called nuclear energy independence from Russia. What are other important domains in which Ukrainian nuclear industry heavily depends on Russia? This is of course the nuclear fuel cycle. That is the nuclear fuel fabrication and the reprocessing and storage of spent nuclear fuel. Ukraine does have some uranium, and it does mine it, but it has to send it to Russia for enrichment, reprocessing, and fabrication of nuclear fuel. And since mid-90s, Ukraine has declared that it will do everything to get some independence in this domain, and that even a state program, target economic program, nuclear fuel of Ukraine, was adopted that set the goal that to produce all the nuclear fuel in Ukraine, but nothing was achieved in this program. And Ukraine even negotiated with Russia the creation of nuclear fuel fabrication plant in Ukraine. But the construction of this plant has not, of course, commenced. There are significant problems with its financing, and they are unlikely to be resolved considering the ongoing crisis. And this is a very interesting paradox, which is very telling about how Ukraine tried to gain some independence, energy independence, nuclear energy independence from Russia with Russian help, and how it doesn't, of course, work. One thing that where Ukraine has made some progress, one domain, is the diversification of nuclear fuel supplies. That is, Ukrainian Energoatom has signed an agreement with American Westinghouse, U.S. Westinghouse, for provision of nuclear fuel assemblies for its Russian or Soviet-type reactors. And there was some testing going on, not extremely successful since mid-2000s. And after the crisis with Russia began in April 2014, Energoatom and Westinghouse signed an agreement to extend the contract up to 2020. And the goal is that Westinghouse would provide all three of units at the Yuzhno-Ukrainska station with American fuel assemblies. And of course, there is a huge outcry in Russian media about how it is unsafe and how Ukraine is on the way to another Chernobyl. But most important, also very important, is that Ukraine has been very slow to address the problems of radioactive waste and spent nuclear fuel management in systematic way. And it still has to send most of its spent nuclear fuel to Russia for reprocessing and for storage, and for the cost of $100 million per year. And of course, it will have to re-import the radioactive waste resulting from it, and Ukraine has nowhere to store it. So let me briefly conclude to say that I think that Ukraine's great energy and specifically nuclear independence, will be long in coming. And Ukraine, because of the difficulties in reforming the energy sector and the close ties between Russia and Ukraine in the domain of nuclear technologies. So in spite of the ongoing conflict, Ukraine will still have to negotiate with Russia over all these issues to ensure nuclear safety.